The year is 1941. The world is a powder keg. In the Pacific, the Imperial Japanese Navy, with its audacious vision and well-trained air crews, has just demonstrated the terrifying potential of naval air power. They struck a blow that echoed around the globe, and in that moment, the age of the battleship began to wane, giving way to a new, formidable queen of the seas, the aircraft carrier. But what few understood at that pivotal juncture was not just the strategic shift underway, but the sheer, unfathomable scale of industrial might that would ultimately decide the conflict. Imagine, if you will, the bustling shipyards of Newport News, Virginia on April 28, 1941. Amidst the clamor and sparks, the first steel plates of what would become the USS Essex were meticulously laid down. This wasn't just the birth of another warship. It was the genesis of a phenomenon, the blueprint for a class of aircraft carriers that would not merely participate in the Pacific War, but fundamentally transform it, eventually overwhelming the enemy with a tide of steel and aircraft that was simply unprecedented in human history. This single ship design, designated hull number CV-9, stretching an imposing 872 feet in length and displacing a massive 27,100 tons, was envisioned to be a powerful war machine. Its flight deck, a vast expanse of steel, was designed to launch and recover between 90 to 100 aircraft. Yet, even the most visionary strategists and the most dedicated engineers could not fully grasp the monumental impact this design would have. It was destined to ignite the most devastating carrier production campaign the world had ever witnessed, a testament to American ingenuity and industrial capacity. The early lessons of the Pacific War, particularly the stunning initial successes of the Japanese, had indelibly etched a crucial truth into the minds of American naval planners. Aircraft carriers were not merely supplementary weapons. They were the decisive instruments of naval power. This recognition wasn't simply an academic observation. It was a profound strategic pivot. Control the skies above the fleet, cut the enemy's aerial supply lines, neutralize their air power, and entire enemy fleets, no matter how formidable, would become vulnerable, exposed, and ultimately defenseless. The Imperial Japanese Navy, led by figures like Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, had already embraced this doctrine. Their combined fleet boasted 6 formidable fleet carriers: the Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu, Shokaku, and Zuikaku. These were the very vessels that had unleashed the fury at Pearl Harbor, projecting Japanese power across vast swathes of the Pacific and signaling a new era of naval warfare. Yamamoto's vision was clear. Naval aviation was not just a component of modern warfare, it was the decisive factor. The irony, of course, was that the Americans would soon prove him right, though in a manner he could never have anticipated, turning his own strategic insight against him with devastating effectiveness. The USS Essex, upon her shakedown cruise, was a marvel of engineering. Cutting through the Atlantic swells at a brisk 32.7 knots, her Westinghouse-geared turbines roared, generating an astonishing 150,000 shaft horsepower. From the bridge, Captain Donald Duncan meticulously observed the flight operations, a testament to the complex synergy of man and machine. His ship carried a formidable air wing, 36 F-6F Hellcat fighters, agile and deadly in aerial combat, 36 SB-2C Helldiver dive bombers, capable of delivering precise, destructive payloads, and 18 TBF Avenger torpedo bombers, designed to cripple enemy warships. This was a striking force unmatched in its versatility and power. The prioritization of the Essex-class ships at all shipyards wasn't accidental or arbitrary. It was a calculated decision, a clear strategic mandate from the highest levels of American leadership. President Franklin D. Roosevelt and the United States Navy understood with crystal clarity that these aircraft carriers would be the linchpin of victory in World War II. They represented an investment not just in steel and machinery, but in the very future of naval warfare, an investment that would pay dividends far beyond initial expectations. The Essex class represented American industrial engineering at its zenith, a masterclass in efficiency and strategic foresight. Unlike many Japanese carrier designs, which often incorporated individual modifications and bespoke features, the Essex class embraced the revolutionary power of standardization. This wasn't about cutting corners. It was about achieving unprecedented rates of mass production. Each ship, displacing a standard 27,100 tons and fully loaded at 36,280 tons, was an identical twin to its sisters in critical aspects, allowing for streamlined construction, interchangeable parts, and simplified maintenance. This standardization was a silent weapon, a foundational element of the impending American triumph. Consider the stark contrast in production figures. Traditional carrier construction in Japan was a painstaking artisanal process, typically requiring 4 to 5 years to complete a single vessel. The Essex class, by comparison, averaged a staggering 20 months from the laying of the keel to commissioning. Think about that. In the time it took Japan to launch one carrier, the U.S. could launch 2, sometimes even 3. This wasn't merely a quantitative difference. It represented a fundamental divergence in industrial philosophy and a stark preview of the war's inevitable outcome. Men like Commander David McCampbell, a Princeton-educated aviator with a sharp mind for aerial combat and logistics, understood the true essence of carrier warfare. He had studied carrier aviation tactics until they were ingrained in his very being. For him, the ultimate metric wasn't just the size of the ships or the number of aircraft, but the sortie rate. The number of aircraft launched per hour, multiplied by the number of operational carriers. Coupled with this was the critical need for pilot replacement rates to exceed combat losses. McCampbell intuitively grasped that the chasm between victory and defeat often hinged on a nation's industrial capacity and the robustness of its training programs. It was a harsh, unforgiving equation, and the Americans were about to solve it with overwhelming force. On board the Japanese carrier Shokaku, a vessel Captain Hiroshi Matsubara knew intimately, with her 72 operational aircraft, a different reality was unfolding. Matsubara, a veteran of 9 previous war patrols, had witnessed firsthand the accelerating pace of American industrial output. He knew, with a growing sense of dread, that Japanese shipyards, despite their efforts, simply could not match it. The Imperial Navy had attempted to accelerate its own carrier production, developing the Unryu class based on the older Hiryu design, aiming to reduce construction time and cost. But these efforts were largely in vain. Most of these ships would never be completed, and even those that were often lacked trained air crews. It was a desperate attempt to catch a runaway train. The Shokaku herself was a powerful ship, displacing 25,275 tons standard and powered by steam turbines generating 160,000 shaft horsepower. Her crew of 160 men were seasoned veterans, having bravely survived attacks from American carriers, submarines, and land-based aircraft. Yet, the carrier harbored a fatal vulnerability, a systemic weakness that plagued all Japanese naval aviation: the inability to replace losses in trained pilots and aircraft at a rate even remotely comparable to American production. This was not a flaw in design or individual bravery. It was a deep, structural failing in their entire war machine, one that would prove insurmountable. Meanwhile, on the American home front, shipyards across the nation were being transformed into an unprecedented production line. Newport News Shipbuilding, the birthplace of the Essex, was assigned the monumental task of constructing 7 carriers of the class. Bethlehem Steel's Four River Shipyard received 4 initial contracts. The Philadelphia Navy Yard, Norfolk Navy Yard, and New York Navy Yard all joined this colossal program, each a cog in a perfectly synchronized machine. Crucially, each shipyard specialized in specific construction phases while rigorously adhering to standardized specifications. This wasn't a free-for-all, it was a tightly coordinated effort, a national symphony of steel and sweat. The results were astounding. The USS Yorktown, CV-10, was launched on December 21, 1942, a mere 371 days after the attack on Pearl Harbor, a symbolic act of defiance and retribution. The USS Intrepid, CV-11, followed on April 26, 1943. The USS Hornet, CV-12, hit the water on August 30, 1943. And the USS Franklin, CV-13, was launched on October 14, 1943. The launches continued with what seemed like mechanical precision, each new carrier a tangible demonstration of American industrial capacity, a force unprecedented in naval history. It was a drumbeat of production, a relentless surge that signaled to the world, and especially to Japan, that America was fully mobilized and utterly committed. Imagine the tension, the sheer focus, in the Combat Information Center of an Essex-class carrier. Radar operator First Class James Patterson, working his 4-hour shift aboard the USS Bunker Hill, was a critical node in this complex network. His SK air search radar, a piece of cutting-edge technology for its time, could detect aircraft at ranges exceeding 100 miles under optimal conditions, providing precious minutes of early warning. The Japanese carriers, by contrast, operated with inferior radar systems, offering minimal, often too late, detection capabilities. This technological disparity was not a minor detail. It was a decisive advantage. At 14:35 on June 19, 1944, Patterson's scope flared to life with the unmistakable signature of incoming aircraft. Range, 150 miles. Bearing, 260 degrees relative. Multiple contacts. Estimated 69 aircraft in the first wave. The alarm button was pressed. The sound-powered telephone snatched up. Combat Information Center, radar. Large raid bearing 260. Range 150 miles. Angels unknown. Closing. The Pacific skies were about to erupt. This was the prelude to what would become known as the Battle of the Philippine Sea. A confrontation Vice Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa had committed his entire carrier force to. An operation codenamed Eigo. Admiral Soemu Toyoda, Commander-in-Chief of the Combined Fleet, had personally ordered Ozawa to implement this audacious plan, to achieve what Japan had tragically failed to do 2 years earlier at Midway: lure the American fleet into a decisive battle and annihilate it. Ozawa's force consisted of 9 carriers: the Taiho, Shokaku, Zuikaku, Junyo, Hio, Ryuho, Chitose, Chiyoda, and Zuiho, collectively mustering 440 carrier aircraft, representing Japan's last concentrated naval aviation strength. It was a desperate gamble, a last roll of the dice. Opposing this formidable, yet ultimately doomed force was Admiral Raymond Spruance, commanding the U.S. Fifth Fleet, overseeing defensive preparations from his flagship, the USS Indianapolis. The enemy aircraft were approaching at 300 knots. time to intercept, a mere 30 minutes. F-6 Hellcats, already airborne on combat air patrol, were vectored to intercept coordinates. The complex geometry of aerial combat was reduced to vectors, speeds, and altitudes, plotted and calculated with an efficiency the Japanese simply could not match. While Ozawa had amassed 440 aircraft across 9 flat tops, Spruance commanded an even larger, more capable force. 956 fighters, torpedo, and dive bombers operating from 15 carriers, including 6 of the new, highly efficient Essex-class behemoths. Task Force 58's first fighter interception came at 15-hour hours. The Hellcats, powerful and heavily armed, plunged through the Japanese formation with devastating effectiveness. Each Hellcat, bristling with 6 machine guns firing 2,000 rounds per minute of armor-piercing and incendiary ammunition, was a flying fortress. The Japanese Zeros, once the undisputed masters of the Pacific skies, were now thoroughly outclassed in speed, armor, and sheer firepower. It was an unequal contest. Lieutenant Alexander Vratsiu, a name etched into naval aviation legend, famously shot down 6 Japanese aircraft in a mere 8 minutes during this engagement. His Hellcats' superior altitude performance and diving speed simplified the geometry of aerial combat. Climb above the enemy formation, dive through with guns blazing, use superior speed to escape, and then climb again for another merciless attack run. The Japanese pilots, many with less than 100 hours of flight time, were no match for veteran American aviators, who often boasted 500 to 1,000 combat hours. This wasn't just a difference in aircraft, it was a chasm in training, experience, and the very system that produced these fighting men. The second Japanese attack wave, comprising 128 aircraft, arrived at 1530. They were met by an impenetrable wall of American fighters and blistering anti-aircraft fire. The resulting slaughter was so one-sided that American pilots, with grim gallows humor, dubbed it the Great Mariana's Turkey Shoot. By sunset on June 19th, Ozawa had lost a staggering 346 carrier aircraft and 50 land-based planes. American losses, by stark contrast, totaled a mere 30 aircraft. The equation was inexorable, brutally clear. Japanese pilot training programs, already strained, required 18 months to produce a marginally qualified carrier aviator. American programs, fueled by a relentless industrial and educational machine, were graduating fully qualified pilots every 6 months, in numbers exceeding total Japanese production by factors of 10 to 1. It was not just a battle, it was a systemic dismantling, yet the Essex-class carrier's demonstration of overwhelming superiority had just begun. On June 20th, Admiral Mark Mitcher, a bold and decisive leader, ordered a maximum-range strike against the retreating Japanese fleet. 216 American aircraft launched in the late afternoon, pushing their fuel limits to the absolute extreme. This audacious strike delivered another crushing blow. It sank the carrier Hio, severely damaged the Zuikaku and Chiyoda, and destroyed another 65 Japanese aircraft. But as the American strike force turned for home, they faced a new, terrifying enemy: the encroaching darkness and dwindling fuel. Many pilots faced the stark choice of ditching in the vast, unforgiving Pacific, or desperately trying to find their carriers. In a legendary display of leadership and absolute confidence in his fleet, Meacher made a decision that would become enshrined in naval history. Turn on the lights. every ship in Task Force 58, defying the ever-present threat of Japanese submarines, illuminated itself, transforming the vast ocean into a series of glowing beacons for the returning, exhausted aircraft. This act wasn't just about saving pilots. It was a profound declaration of American superiority, a brazen display of dominance in enemy-infested waters. 80 aircraft were lost to fuel exhaustion, but, crucially, most pilots were rescued, ready to fight another day. Japan, however, had lost 2 more carriers, and, perhaps more critically, virtually all of its remaining trained aviators. The Battle of the Philippine Sea represented more than a tactical victory. It demonstrated, in no uncertain terms, the impossibility of Japanese victory against the relentless, overwhelming might of American industry. At the very heart of the Japanese Navy's hopes for victory lay the deeply ingrained idea of the decisive battle. A climactic engagement where the American fleet would be lured close to Japanese bases and utterly destroyed. This was the strategic doctrine born from the legacy of Tsushima, refined by the architects of Pearl Harbor. Instead, what American carrier production had created was an insurmountable advantage, rendering such a decisive battle utterly meaningless for Japan. By July 1944, a mere 3 years after the keel of the Essex was laid, an incredible 14 Essex-class carriers were fully operational in the Pacific. The USS Essex, Yorktown, Intrepid, Hornet, Franklin, Ticonderoga, Randolph, Lexington, Bunker Hill, Wasp, Hancock, Bennington, Boxer, and Bonhomme Richard. Each of these floating air bases typically operated 90 to 100 aircraft, though by 1945, some air groups with the addition of night fighters even exceeded this formidable number. The combined air strength of these carriers exceeded 1,400 first-line aircraft, crucially backed by trained replacement pilots for every single cockpit. Contrast this with Japan's desperate efforts. Since Pearl Harbor, they had managed to complete a grand total of 1 new fleet carrier, the Taiho, commissioned on March 7, 1944. Tragically for Japan, she survived only 3 months before being sunk by the submarine USS Albacore. The carrier Shinano, a colossal vessel converted from a Yamato-class battleship hull, was commissioned on November 19, 1944. She met an even swifter end, sunk en route a mere 10 days after commissioning, on November 29, 1944, by 4 torpedoes from the U.S. Navy submarine Archerfish. The Shinano remains, to this day, the largest ship ever sunk by a submarine. This shocking disparity in carrier production wasn't just a grim statistic. It revealed the utter futility of Japanese resistance. American shipyards were completing 1 Essex-class carrier every 2 months, a pace that defied wartime constraints. Japanese yards, even under immense pressure, still required an agonizing 4 years to build a single fleet carrier. By October 1944, when the Imperial Navy, in a desperate, final gamble, committed its few remaining carriers as decoys at Leyte Gulf, the outcome was not merely foreseeable, but predetermined by the sheer, unyielding weight of American industrial capacity. The Battle of Leyte Gulf, the largest naval battle in history, served as the ultimate demonstration of the Essex carrier's complete and utter dominance. On October 24, 1944, a staggering 17 American carriers unleashed continuous, relentless strikes against the Japanese fleet. Admiral Kureda's center force, which included the super battleships Yamato and Musashi, the largest and most heavily armed warships ever built, faced an aerial onslaught unlike anything previously imagined. The Musashi alone absorbed 19 torpedo and 17 bomb hits before finally succumbing and sinking, a grim testament to the concentrated firepower that Essex air groups could deliver. The era of the battleship was truly over, ended not by another battleship, but by the devastating power of carrier-borne aircraft. Meanwhile, Admiral Ozawa's northern force, functioning as a desperate carrier decoy, consisted of the Zuikaku, Zuiho, Chitose, and Chiyoda. These four carriers collectively mustered a paltry 116 aircraft in total, many of them piloted by raw trainees with fewer than 50 flight hours. They were lambs to the slaughter. The American carriers launched an overwhelming 527 sorties against Ozawa's force on October 25th, sinking all four Japanese carriers. The Zuikaku, the last fleet carrier of the Pearl Harbor attack force, went down with most of her crew, a poignant and tragic end to an era. Admiral William Halsey's Third Fleet now comprised 17 fast carriers, built around the unshakable core of the Essex class. Task Force 38, with its immense logistical support and operational efficiency, could maintain continuous flight operations, launching strikes every 90 minutes for days on end without exhaustion. Japanese naval aviation, once the pride of the Pacific, had been reduced to desperate, untrained pilots flying one-way kamikaze missions, a heartbreaking testament to their defeat. The sheer survivability of the Essex-class design was starkly demonstrated by the USS Franklin on March 19, 1945. 2 armor-piercing bombs detonated in her hangar deck, triggering massive explosions and raging fires, turning her into an inferno. The ship suffered an appalling 724 killed and 265 wounded, the highest casualty toll ever survived by any U.S. carrier during World War II. Yet, the Franklin remained afloat, a testament to her robust construction and the heroic efforts of her crew. She eventually returned to the United States under her own power and could have, if the war had continued, returned to service. This contrasted dramatically with Japanese carrier survivability. The Japanese carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, lost at Midway, were destroyed by damage that Essex-class carriers repeatedly absorbed and recovered from. This wasn't merely luck, it was a fundamental difference in design philosophy and an unparalleled commitment to damage control. American ship design prioritized survivability, incorporating features like armored flight decks, extensive compartmentalization, and sophisticated firefighting systems. Japanese carriers, by comparison, often emphasized offensive capability and speed over defensive resilience, a gamble that proved fatal. Commander John Thatch, the brilliant developer of the Thatch-Weave defensive tactic, meticulously analyzed the impact of American carrier superiority. His assessment highlighted that each Essex-class carrier multiplied combat power through a synergistic combination of more aircraft, vastly superior radar, advanced anti-aircraft defenses, and damage control capabilities that allowed these ships to continue fighting after absorbing punishment that would have sent any other Navy's carriers to the bottom. The production statistics told the complete, unambiguous story. During World War II, the U.S. Navy ordered 32 aircraft carriers of the Essex class, of which 26 were laid down, and an astonishing 24 were actually commissioned. Japan, across 2 decades, had commissioned fewer than a dozen true fleet carriers, including the Hosho, Akagi, Kaga, Ryujo, Soryu, Hiryu, Shokaku, Zuikaku, Taiho, and the largely incomplete Unryu class. The United States, in 1943 alone, produced more fleet carriers than Japan had commissioned in the entire 20 years leading up to and during the war. It was a quantitative chasm that no amount of bravery or skill could bridge. Newport News Shipbuilding, the pioneer, completed 7 Essex-class carriers: USS Essex, Yorktown, Intrepid, Hornet, Franklin, Ticonderoga, and Randolph. Each ship moved from keel-laying to commissioning in under 20 months. The shipyard's workforce, a diverse and dedicated group that included thousands of women workers, maintained 3 carriers under simultaneous construction throughout 1943 and 1944. This wasn't just shipbuilding. It was a national mobilization of human effort and industrial genius. Bethlehem Steel's Fore River Shipyard completed 6 carriers: USS Lexington, Bunker Hill, Wasp, Hancock, Shangri-La, and Lake Champlain. The production rate, driven by refined assembly techniques and relentless innovation, accelerated with each successive hull. The Lake Champlain achieved commissioning a mere 14 months after her keel was laid, setting an astonishing record for fleet carrier construction. The Philadelphia Navy Yard demonstrated the revolutionary advantages of modular construction. Entire ship sections were prefabricated simultaneously while the keel was being laid, a testament to engineering foresight. USS Antietam and USS Boxer were completed in 15 and 16 months respectively. The techniques developed for Essex-class construction, born of wartime necessity, would go on to influence shipbuilding globally for decades, fundamentally changing how large vessels were constructed. Individual Essex carriers achieved remarkable combat records, each a testament to their inherent superiority and the valor of their crews. The USS Lexington, affectionately known as the Blue Ghost, because Tokyo Rose repeatedly and erroneously reported her sunk, participated in every major Pacific campaign, from Tarawa to the doorstep of Japan itself. She destroyed over 300 enemy aircraft and, despite suffering multiple kamikaze hits, remained operational, a defiant symbol of American resilience. Even the USS Enterprise Air Group, though operating from a Yorktown-class carrier, worked seamlessly with the Essex-class carriers, showcasing the profound advantages of American naval aviation standardization. The ability to cross-deck aircraft and pilots between carriers, to transfer them and their specific roles effortlessly, multiplied operational flexibility and adaptability across the fleet. Japanese carriers, each often with unique characteristics and incompatible systems, sorely lacked this critical interoperability, hindering their ability to adapt and combine forces effectively. The Japanese response to this overwhelming American production superiority was marked by desperate and often futile attempts to catch up. The Shinano conversion, an attempt to create a carrier from an existing battleship hull, was a desperate gamble. The third member of the Yamato super battleship class, Shinano, had been under construction since May 1940. The decision to convert her into an aircraft carrier after the disaster at Midway was a desperate strategic pivot, but the result was a compromised design. As mentioned, she lasted a mere 10 days before submarine torpedoes sent her to the bottom. Japan's Unryu-class program, a more systematic attempt at mass production using simplified designs, also proved largely unsuccessful. Most of these carriers were still under construction or outright canceled by the end of the war. The few completed Unryu ships never embarked full air groups due to severe shortages of carrier-qualified air crews. Only 3 were completed before the war's end, and none ever operated with a full air group, a poignant demonstration that ship construction without trained personnel to man them was utterly meaningless. By January 1945, American carrier task forces operated with virtual impunity in Japanese home waters. Task Force 58, under the relentless command of Admiral Mark Mitcher, could launch 1,000 aircraft strikes against Tokyo itself. The Japanese, by this point, had no operational carriers and fewer than 100 qualified carrier pilots. The certainty of American victory was, by this point, absolute. The human cost differential was equally revealing and deeply tragic. For the loss of just 123 aircraft and 109 lives during the Battle of the Philippine Sea, the U.S. destroyed nearly 600 enemy aircraft, sank 2 enemy fleet carriers, a light carrier, and 2 oilers, killing nearly 3,000 of the IJN's pilots and sailors. Each Essex-class carrier required approximately 3,000 highly trained crew members to operate. American training programs, a vast national endeavor, were producing an incredible 5,000 qualified carrier personnel monthly. Japanese training programs, starved of resources and experienced instructors, had effectively ceased by late 1944, a catastrophic collapse that sealed their fate. The technological gap was equally decisive. American carriers operated with advanced SK and SK-2 radar systems, providing precise fighter direction at ranges exceeding 150 miles. Furthermore, the Identification Friend or Foe IFF system, a revolutionary piece of technology, prevented friendly fire incidents during the chaotic, massive air battles. Japanese carriers, by contrast, still largely relied on visual observers and primitive radar sets with effective ranges under 50 miles. This wasn't just a slight disadvantage, it was a fundamental blindness in a rapidly evolving technological war. Flight deck operations on an Essex-class carrier demonstrated American systematic superiority in every aspect. These carriers could launch a full strike of 80 aircraft in under 45 minutes, a choreographed ballet of power and precision. Recovery operations, guided by highly skilled landing signal officers, LSO, and utilizing improved arresting gear, allowed for rapid landing cycles, minimizing congestion and maximizing efficiency. Japanese carriers, due to their less standardized designs and less refined procedures, required nearly 2 hours for equivalent operations, and suffered significantly higher accident rates. The Combat Information Center, CIC, aboard each Essex-class carrier represented a true revolution in naval warfare. This bustling nerve center allowed for the real-time plotting of hundreds of aircraft, surface contacts, and submarine threats. Constant radio communications with every American aircraft, combined with meticulous coordination between multiple carrier task groups, created a cohesive, highly effective fighting unit. Japanese carriers, by stark contrast, still largely relied on voice tubes and manual plotting boards, severely limiting their ability to gather, process, and disseminate critical information rapidly. This difference in command and control was as significant as any difference in firepower. Even the design of aviation fuel systems revealed profound philosophical differences. American carriers utilized sealed systems with CO2 purging to prevent dangerous vapor explosions. Fuel tanks were strategically surrounded by void spaces and water-filled compartments, acting as additional layers of protection. Japanese carriers, including the new Taiho, tragically suffered catastrophic losses from single torpedo hits when aviation fuel vapors, poorly contained, ignited and exploded. These weren't mere accidents. They were systemic design flaws born from a different set of priorities. The Kamikaze campaign, which began in October 1944, represented Japan's desperate, tragic recognition of conventional defeat. One-way suicide attacks were, for them, the only remaining means of reaching American carriers through the impenetrable wall of fighters and anti-aircraft fire. Yet, even these desperate measures achieved only limited success against the Essex-class carriers, with their armored flight decks and vastly improved damage control. The USS Intrepid, for instance, survived 5 kamikaze hits and, through heroic effort and superior design, returned to service each time. The USS Ticonderoga endured 2 kamikaze strikes that killed 144 men but remained operational. The USS Essex herself survived a kamikaze strike on November 25, 1944, that killed 15 men but inflicted minimal structural damage. The carrier's resilience utterly frustrated Japanese planners, who had expected single hits to achieve decisive carrier kills. The USS Bunker Hill provided another poignant testament to Essex-class survivability. On May 11, 1945, 2 kamikazes struck her within 30 seconds, causing massive fires and killing 389 men. Despite damage that would undoubtedly have sunk any Japanese carrier, the Bunker Hill sailed to Bremerton under her own power for repairs, a powerful symbol of the ship's survival and the superior damage control training and equipment of her crew. By March 1945, with the Bonhomme Richer commissioned as the 14th Essex-class carrier to see combat, American carrier strength in the Pacific exceeded 100 flight decks, a combined force that included light carriers and escort carriers. These air groups had totaled over P-400 aircraft, with complete replacement aircraft and pilots readily available. The Japanese, by devastating contrast, had no operational carriers and fewer than 5,000 aircraft of all types left in their home islands. The mismatch was absolute, a disparity so profound it transcended mere numbers and became a matter of strategic inevitability. Admiral Chester Nimitz, the shrewd and visionary commander-in-chief of the Pacific Fleet, analyzed the strategic implications in his report to Admiral Ernest King. His assessment was unequivocal. The Essex-class carrier program has provided us with not just ships, but a systematic superiority that the enemy cannot match. Each carrier represents American industrial might, training excellence, and technological advancement that exceeds Japanese capabilities by orders of magnitude. The production tempo never slowed, even as victory became assured. The USS Shangri-La was commissioned on September 15, 1944. The USS Lake Champlain followed on June 3, 1945, and the USS Tarawa on December 8, 1945, just months after the war ended. The program's incredible momentum continued unabated because American planners, ever looking ahead, were already preparing for potential future conflicts beyond World War II. Essex-class ships played an absolutely central, indispensable role in the Pacific theater of World War II from 1943 through the very end of the war. Beginning with the daring raids in the Central Pacific and the brutal invasion of Tarawa in the Gilbert Islands, every major amphibious operation from Tarawa to Okinawa depended entirely on Essex-class carriers for crucial air support. The Marianas invasion vividly demonstrated the incredible carrier operational tempo. 15 carriers launched 470 fighter sweeps, 220 bombing strikes, and maintained continuous combat air patrol for an astonishing 19 consecutive days. Aircraft availability rates consistently exceeded 80%, despite the heavy toll of combat losses and mechanical attrition. Japanese land-based aviation, once a formidable threat, was systematically eliminated as an effective force. Philippines operations in October 1944 saw 17 fast carriers operating in 4 distinct task groups, a massive, coordinated armada. American carriers launched over 1,400 sorties on October 24th alone during the Battle of Leyte Gulf. The next day, carrier aircraft delivered the final, overwhelming blow to the super battleship Musashi, a ship no single weapon could hope to sink, but which succumbed to the concentrated fury of relentless air attacks. Commander David McCampbell's achievements with Air Group 15 aboard the USS Essex exemplified this American superiority, both individual and systemic. On June 19, 1944, during the infamous Marianas Turkey Shoot, McCampbell shot down 5 Japanese dive bombers, instantly achieving ace-in-a-day status. Later that same afternoon, during a second sortie, he downed 2 more zeros over Guam, cementing his legend. Then, on October 24, 1944, in the initial phase of the Battle of Leyte Gulf, he became the only American airman to achieve ace-in-a-day status twice, shooting down an incredible 9 enemy planes in a single mission. McCampbell's Air Group 15 became known throughout the fleet as the fabled 15. During 6 months of intense combat operations, they destroyed more enemy planes, 315 airborne and 348 on the ground, and sank more enemy shipping than any other air group in the entire Pacific War. The entire air group was collectively credited with sinking 296,500 tons of enemy shipping, an astonishing tally that included 1 battleship, 3 aircraft carriers, 9 cruisers, and 19 destroyers. Their success was a product of individual skill, but also the unparalleled training and logistical support that the Essex class provided. The pilot training differential revealed yet another critical dimension of American superiority. Each Essex-class carrier's air group required approximately 350 pilots and air crews. American training programs were producing an astounding 2,000 qualified naval aviators monthly, a veritable torrent of skilled personnel. By 1944, Japanese training programs had catastrophically collapsed, producing fewer than 100 partially trained pilots monthly. This wasn't merely a shortage, it was a total breakdown, a systemic failure to replenish the lifeblood of their naval air arm. Operational losses painted an even grimmer picture of the experience differentials. American carrier air groups averaged a mere 2% operational loss rate per month from accidents, a testament to rigorous training and safety protocols. Japanese units, however, staffed by inexperienced pilots under immense pressure, suffered a staggering 10% monthly operational attrition. Combat loss ratios by 1945 exceeded 10.1 in America's favor. The Turkey Shoot was not an anomaly. It was, by this point, the horrifying norm. Aircraft production statistics further reinforced the overwhelming carrier superiority. Grumman delivered an incredible 12 on 25 F-6F Hellcats between 1943 and 1945. Curtiss-Wright produced 7 Maubun Han-Haz 2C Helldivers. General Motors' Eastern Aircraft Division manufactured 9,139 TBM Avengers. Monthly American production, by 1944, routinely exceeded Japanese annual production. These weren't just numbers. They were the sheer, crushing weight of industrial might that Japan simply could not contend with. The logistics network supporting Essex-class operations was equally impressive, a masterpiece of planning and execution. A vast fleet of oilers, ammunition ships, and supply vessels kept the carriers at sea for months on end, transforming the task force into a self-sustaining, mobile city. Underway replenishment techniques, perfected during the war, allowed for continuous operations without the need for frequent, vulnerable port visits. Japanese carriers, by contrast, required regular port visits for even basic supplies, severely limiting their operational flexibility and endurance. This difference was often as decisive as any battle. The Iwo Jima campaign in February 1945 showcased the unparalleled endurance of the Essex class. Carriers launched relentless strikes for 72 consecutive hours before the invasion, then provided continuous close air support for 36 days, a testament to the stamina of both ships and crews. Aircraft from the USS Essex alone flew an incredible 18 combat sorties, dropping 156 tons of bombs and firing 141 rockets. No Japanese carrier force, however brave, could have sustained such an operational tempo. By April 1945, as operations commenced against Okinawa, the disparity had become utterly overwhelming. Task Force 58 operated 18 fast carriers, including 14 Essex-class ships, a combined force that also included Independence-class light carriers. These air groups totaled over 1,400 aircraft, with complete replacement aircraft and pilots available at a moment's notice. The Japanese, in a final, desperate gamble, scraped together 1,900 aircraft of all types for kamikaze attacks, most piloted by students with under 30 hours of flight time. The Okinawa campaign lasted 82 grueling days, during which Essex-class carriers maintained continuous operations despite enduring an astounding 1,900 kamikaze sorties. The USS Bunker Hill, USS Enterprise, and USS Randolph all survived kamikaze hits and continued operations, a testament to their resilience. The Japanese expended their entire remaining air strength, achieving minimal strategic impact against the heavily armored American carriers. The final carrier raids against Japan in July and August 1945 demonstrated total, unchallenged supremacy. Carriers launched strikes against airfields, rail yards, and harbors with minimal opposition, flying virtually unmolested through Japanese skies. On July 10, 1945, Task Force 38 launched 1,022 sorties against Tokyo, more aircraft than Japan possessed in their entire home islands. Japanese anti-aircraft defenses, once a formidable concern, were rendered utterly ineffective against high-performance American aircraft. The atomic bombs ultimately ended the war before Operation Olympic, the planned invasion of Japan, could demonstrate an even greater concentration of carrier power. Even among allies, the British Pacific Fleet's experience operating alongside Essex-class carriers revealed American superiority. British carriers, with their armored flight decks, were robust, but their smaller air groups struggled to match the American operational tempo. HMS Formidable, for instance, operated a mere 36 aircraft compared to an Essex's 100. The British openly admired American damage control techniques and subsequently adopted many of them for their post-war carrier designs. Post-war analysis revealed the full scope of Essex-class dominance. Astonishingly, none were lost to enemy action, although several sustained crippling damage due to aerial attacks. Despite enduring relentless kamikaze attacks, conventional bombing, and torpedo strikes, not a single Essex-class carrier was lost to enemy action. Japanese carriers, by contrast, suffered nearly 100% loss rates. This survivability differential was not a matter of luck. It was the direct result of a superior design philosophy, robust construction, and unparalleled excellence in damage control training and equipment. Admiral Raymond Spruance's assessment powerfully captured this incredible achievement. The Essex-class carrier program provided the United States Navy with the decisive weapon system of the Pacific War. Not through individual superiority alone, though that existed, but through systematic production that overwhelmed Japanese capabilities. We built more carriers in 1943 than Japan commissioned in 20 years. That reality determined the war's outcome. The legacy of the Essex class extended far beyond World War II. These formidable ships would continue to serve with distinction through the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and even into the 1990s as training carriers. The USS Lexington, the last operational Essex-class carrier, was not decommissioned until 1991, having served an incredible 48 years. Their revolutionary design influenced every subsequent American carrier, and the production techniques developed for their construction revolutionized shipbuilding globally. The final accounting of their impact was stark and irrefutable. 24 Essex-class carriers were commissioned. 14 saw combat in World War II. Air groups from these carriers destroyed over 5,000 Japanese aircraft and sank an astonishing 200,000 tons of enemy warships. Japanese carrier aviation, which had begun the war with such devastating success at Pearl Harbor, was systematically eliminated through the sheer, crushing weight of American industrial superiority. Captain R. Lee Burke, who would later become Chief of Naval Operations, observed the Essex-class carriers operating with Task Force 58 and offered an assessment that was characteristically direct and brutally honest. The Japanese started this war with the best carrier pilots in the world. We ended it with the only carrier pilots in the world. He continued, "The Essex class made that possible through sheer numbers and superior design. We didn't just defeat them, we overwhelmed them." Industrial mobilization statistics revealed the true, monumental scope of American achievement. Newport News Shipbuilding, for example, increased its workforce from 11,000 to an incredible 31,000 workers between 1941 and 1943. 3 shifts maintained round-the-clock construction, a relentless 24/7 effort. Women comprised an astonishing 20% of the workforce by 1944, stepping into vital roles and shattering traditional gender barriers. Each Essex-class carrier required 55,000 tons of steel, 1,000 miles of electrical cable, and 250,000 man-hours of labor. The Japanese struggled to complete single carriers, while American yards maintained multiple hulls in simultaneous construction, a powerful testament to the strength of their industrial base. Between 1932 and 1941, the Japanese Diet had passed 4 commercial shipbuilding bills, providing special subsidies to companies that ordered vessels with military characteristics, attempting to build up their fleet indirectly. But military conversion of merchant vessels, however cleverly designed, simply could not match the scale and efficiency of purpose-built carrier production. The technological revolution embedded in Essex-class construction went far beyond mere numbers. Welding, a newer technique, largely replaced riveting, reducing construction time by a remarkable 30%. Modular assembly allowed for the parallel construction of major sections, further accelerating the process. Improved ventilation systems were designed to prevent aviation fuel vapor accumulation, directly addressing vulnerabilities that plagued Japanese designs. Armored flight decks, a feature often overlooked, provided crucial resistance to bomb penetration. Deck edge elevators, a radical innovation, maintained flight operations even during aircraft movement, vastly improving efficiency. Radar-directed fighter control fundamentally transformed carrier defense. The seamless teamwork of fighter directors aboard the carriers and pilots in the air provided critical advantages that spelled disaster for attackers. A single Essex-class carrier's CIC could coordinate the defense for an entire task group, a testament to centralized control and systematic information processing. Japanese carriers never developed equivalent capabilities, instead relying on individual pilot initiative rather than systematic, coordinated control, a fatal flaw in the face of overwhelming American numbers. The human factor multiplied American advantages in every domain. Damage control training was mandatory for every single crew member, a rigorous regimen that instilled discipline and expertise. Firefighting schools taught advanced techniques that saved multiple carriers from catastrophic loss. Medical facilities aboard each carrier were state-of-the-art for the time, including fully equipped operating theaters and 60-bed sick bays. Japanese carriers, by contrast, had minimal medical facilities and limited damage control training, further contributing to their higher casualty rates and poorer survivability. The economic impact of the Essex program extended deeply throughout American society. Shipyard workers earned unprecedented wages that fueled consumer spending, transforming communities and empowering families. Small businesses in shipyard towns thrived, a ripple effect of the immense wartime investment. The program, in its entirety, demonstrated that democratic mobilization, when fully committed, could achieve production rates that far exceeded the capabilities of totalitarian command economies. By August 1945, with Japan's surrender, the Essex class had achieved something utterly unprecedented in naval history. A single ship class had not merely influenced, but fundamentally determined the outcome of the largest naval war ever fought. This was not achieved through individual excellence alone, though the bravery and skill of American sailors and aviators were legendary. It was through a systematic superiority in production, training, technology, and operational execution that no opponent could possibly match. Vice Admiral John S. McCain, Sr., commanding Task Force 38 at the war's end, provided the final, eloquent assessment. The Essex-class carrier was not just a ship. It was a weapons system that included the vessel, the air group, the supply chain, the training establishment, and the industrial base that produced them faster than the enemy could sink them. That's not fighting fair. That's fighting to win. The numbers, indeed, told the complete story. From April 1941, when the Essex was laid down, to August 1945, when Japan surrendered, American shipyards had created the most powerful naval aviation force in history. 24 carriers of a single, standardized design, over 2,000 aircraft operational at any given time, and 30,000 highly trained carrier personnel. This was victory through overwhelming industrial superiority, a lesson etched in steel and blood. In the depths of the Pacific Ocean, the wreckage of Japanese carriers rests on the ocean floor. The Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu at Midway, the Shoho in the Coral Sea, the Shokaku and Taiho in the Philippine Sea, the Zuikaku, Chitose, Chiyoda, and Zuiho at Leyte Gulf. Their crews, brave and dedicated, are honored by both sides for their courage against impossible odds. But their sacrifice marked the end of an era, a tragic testament to a time when individual skill and experience, however exceptional, could no longer overcome a catastrophic industrial disadvantage. Admiral Chester Nimitz's final report to the Secretary of the Navy concluded with profound insight. The Essex-class carrier program represents the greatest concentration of naval air power ever achieved. These ships and their crews have demonstrated that American industrial might combined with superior training and technology creates a combat capability that no enemy can match. The Essex class didn't just win the Pacific War. They made it impossible for Japan to win. The revolution in naval warfare was complete. Battleships, which had dominated naval thinking for centuries, were decisively relegated to roles of shore bombardment and anti-aircraft defense. The aircraft carrier, perfected in the Essex-class design, had definitively become the capital ship of modern navies, a truth that continues to hold sway even today. The Essex-class carriers had proven, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that in modern warfare, production capacity multiplied by technological advancement equals victory. They had demonstrated that democratic nations, when fully mobilized and united in purpose, could harness industrial power and human ingenuity that authoritarian regimes, despite their ideological fervor, simply could not match. In the vast, unforgiving expanse of the Pacific Ocean, where distances were measured in thousands of miles and battles were determined by aircraft operating from mobile, floating bases, the Essex class had proven a timeless, enduring truth. Quantity produced with quality, coupled with strategic foresight and unwavering national resolve, equals absolute, undeniable victory. Their legacy continues to serve as a powerful reminder of what a nation can achieve when its industrial might, technological innovation, and human spirit are fully unleashed in pursuit of a common, urgent goal. It is a lesson not just for military strategists, but for anyone who seeks to understand the power of systematic excellence and relentless progress in the face of insurmountable challenges.